Who wins the big NFC East matchup between the Philadelphia Eagles and Washington Commanders? Plus, can Josh Allen actually wrap up the MVP against the New England Patriots? The ultimate NFL pregame show starts right now.
It's the ultimate NFL pregame show. Every team, every game, every angle. The local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network going head-to-head on every matchup. It's the ultimate NFL pregame show. Unprecedented insight, unrivaled passion, and unsurpassed knowledge. It's the ultimate NFL pregame show. The Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Week 16 in the NFL is officially here, and we've got everything you need to know heading into the weekend from the local experts across the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Allstreicher, and from the primetime game of Buccaneers and Cowboys to the big 4 o'clock matchup with the Bills and the Patriots, plus why that Commanders and Eagles game matters more than you might think this week. We're going to go game by game and make you the most informed fan for game day with key predictions, keys to victory, how each team can win, and so much more. So we're going to start off with a look at the 1 p.m. slate of games, and kicking us off this week, it is the Eagles and the Commanders. Big NFC East matchup. The Eagles have been on a roll. The Commanders have slowed down a little bit, but still competitive in that NFC conference. And we're going to be diving into a conversation with David Harrison of Locked On Commanders and Louis DiBiase of Locked On Eagles, talking about which team will win this game and how they'll do it.
This week's Crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Eagles and Locked On Commanders is brought to you by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL, all lowercase, to win $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. We appreciate PrizePicks because it's a lot of fun to play and because they're paying us to. So, Louis, 3 things that the Philadelphia Eagles and Washington Commanders must do. I've already given away one of mine, but everybody's going to have to wait for my other 2. What are the 3 things that the Eagles got to do to clinch the NFC East division in front of the Northwest Stadium crowd?
Which, by the way, is still insane that a team in the NFC East has not repeated as division champs since 2004, and that will yet again be the case this year. I spoiled one earlier. I think stopping Jaden Daniels outside of structure is going to be really, really important. I think that's one thing the Eagles' defenses struggle with a bit, is when they get pressure on mobile quarterbacks, getting them down initially. If he starts breaking tackles, getting loose, that's when Terry McLaurin can break free deep. Brian Robinson as well getting involved in this. I think that's the second thing. Limit Brian Robinson. That run game is the bread and butter of the Commanders' offense, kind of like it is for the Eagles with Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley. So if they can win that matchup and limit Brian Robinson again and force Jaden Daniels to have to throw the football, especially from behind, that's a good blueprint. And I think the number 3 thing, one thing for the Eagles' offense, stay balanced. Again, you got to commit to the run game, but I think last week, the success they had through the air, it's important to keep that momentum going into the playoffs. You want to be multiple. So I think, don't overcommit to one thing, running the ball or passing. You also want to keep Saquon Barkley healthy for the postseason. He's taken a lot of hits, and he's really been working over the last 2 months. I mean, touched the ball more than any running back in football. So keep him healthy, and I think staying balanced is important too.
Yeah, 100%. And I'll tell you something that's going to prevent the Eagles potentially from staying balanced to a certain extent, especially in the pass game on either side of the field, is the presence of Marshawn Lattimore. The New Orleans Saints got their first look at the new Commanders cornerback. Of course, they know Marshawn Lattimore very well, and they proceeded to target him 0 times on 29 coverage snaps the Lattimore had against the New Orleans Saints. So it was very, very heavy sign of respect that the Saints gave to the cornerback that they had just traded. So I'm really interested to look at how Jalen Hurts comes out and attacks Marshawn Lattimore, because, I mean, Marshawn is going to be on one of his top receivers. And, both of those receivers are going to be like, look, I know that Marshawn's him, but I'm him too. And you need to throw me the ball and trust me to make a play. So we'll see how that goes. Maybe Marshawn can reignite the A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts hate each other conversation after this week. We'll see.
I hope not. Do not want to come to that again.
I hear you. For the Commanders, 3 things. Obviously, again, contain Saquon Barkley. And Louis, you mentioned it. You gave the Commanders defense a hat tip, and I'm glad you did that, because I'm going to do that as well. Look, overall in the game, if you're stat scouting, Saquon Barkley had 5.6 yards per carry against the Washington Commanders. You say that's a terrible run defense showing by the Washington Commanders. However, first 24 carries, Saquon Barkley averaged 3.5 yards per carry. That is very good against a guy like Saquon Barkley, and well below the 4.76 yards per carry the Commanders defense is giving up per run right now overall for the season. 24 carries, 84 yards before he busted out for 62 yards and 2 touchdowns on 2 carries to end.
Tends to be the way it goes.
End that game. Yeah, and look, that's what Dan Quinn said too on Wednesday. He said, look, the best players in NFL history always turn it up in the fourth quarter. So the Washington Commanders defense has to turn it up in the fourth quarter. It's not enough to stop him for 60 plays. You've got to stop him for 62 if that's how many they run, obviously. Number 2, force the Eagles in. We talked about it again. Vic Fangio doesn't want to stack the box. You've got to make him stack the box. How do you do that? Brian Robinson Jr. and that run game. That offensive line, Louis, not happy after that Eagles game, nor should they have been because they got their butts kicked. Number 3, paid by numbers. That number is number 17. Continue to move Terry McLaurin around. We screamed for it during the Eagles game, after the Eagles game. Finally, it's happening. Get Terry away from Quinn. You know what? I don't even want to see
from
Terry
Guantanamo Bay
on the left side. I don't even want to see him lined up on the left side. Give that rookie all the respect in the world.
That was probably Q's best game of the year for sure.
Absolutely. But you know what? And he had some help. And that's the thing. Again, we talk about non-spotlight players, right? CJ Gardner-Johnson had a hand in that. Zach Bond had a hand in that. Like, obviously, Vic Fangio had a big hand in that. So paid by numbers, get number 17 going, most likely by getting him away from Quinyon Mitchell as much as possible. Those are 3 things the Commanders got to do to get a win.
No, I'm looking at that matchup too. I mean, Quinyon Mitchell had such a good game, but if McLaurin moves around, he might get some matchups against Darius Slay, Cooper DeJean. This is going to be a good chess match. It's not just important for the Eagles to win this one to get the 1 seed, but David, I think too for Washington, they've beaten a lot of good or okay teams, not great teams this year, but if they get this one, that's a signature win. That's a huge confidence boost heading into the postseason to know, hey, we can hang with the best of the best in this conference. So it's an important game for both. And I mean, technically the division's still up for grabs, so that's still something to fight for too.
Check out Louis over at Locked On Eagles and David over at Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Next up, the Detroit Lions. They've been dealing with injury after injury after injury. They're going to be in an NFC North battle. Now the team that's in competition with them for a playoff spot or even the NFC North, but it's the one that's not in the Chicago Bears. So Lauren Cox of Locked On Bears, Matt Derry of Locked On Lions talk about if the Bears can pull the upset or if the Lions will take care of business.
So the Chicago Bears and Detroit Lions face off in a rematch this week. It's crossover Thursday with Locked On Bears and Locked On Lions. I'm your host, Lauren Cox from Locked On Bears, alongside the host of Locked On Lions, Matt Deary. Again, our crossover Thursday is presented by PrizePicks. Download the app and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Matt, I feel like the Lions' path to victory here is a little bit more obvious. So maybe we'll start with the Bears here. A couple of things I want to see them do to try and pull off an upset here. I went through since Thomas Brown took over as Bears offensive play caller, before he was head coach, but just offensive coordinator. Since then, the Bears run less play action than any offense in the NFL. I think the Lions run the second most. The Bears run the least. And last week, they finally stuck with DeAndre Swift and got the running game going. So I'd like to see them get him 20 carries and run more play action off of that. Just put a lot of these backup Lions defenders in a tough spot to have to read, run, pass, get Caleb Williams into a little more of a rhythm, and then open up some deep shots downfield off of that play action. That's what this offense has been missing, some explosive plays on that side of the ball. And then I think on the other side, you got to be aggressive defensively here and understand that maybe the weather will not keep Goff from being an accurate quarterback, but maybe limits some of the downfield shots you can take if the ball's a little cold and hard and you're trying to get rid of it a little bit more quickly and just take more of the easy games. And that means as soon as the ball's in the air, run after the catch and go make those tackles, step up and get after the quarterback, put him in some tough spots to try and have to make some of those more difficult downfield throws in maybe a more cold, windy type of weather day that makes those harder to hit. And I think you have to play high variance football at this point. You live and die by that blitz, live and die by the big plays, and hope that if you just hit on a couple of them, that can be enough to swing this game in the other direction. Because otherwise, if you try and play conservative ball control football against the Lions, they're just going to take you to the woodshed.
Yeah, I'm concerned a little bit about the Bears' deep passing game and some of the guys that are ready to be unlocked against, like we talked about, so some cornerbacks. I mean, Khalil Dorsey had to play because of all the other injuries that the Lions have had in their secondary, and now Dorsey's out for the year. I mentioned Carlton Davis being done for the year, so you're thinking Kendall Vildor, you're thinking Emmanuel Mosley will get a shot. Would Brian Branch be moving from safety to corner, and could they get Melifonwu back, who hasn't played all year, and he slides back into safety where he was a year ago? A lot of question marks there. Terrion Arnold, I think has had a good year. I know PFF doesn't love him, but I think for a rookie, he's held up pretty well. And Amik Robertson's been very good in the slot. Maybe he moves outside, which could help them. But Vildor has had his moments that just have not been good. So that scares me a bit. The one other player that I really think needs to be eating for the Lions on Sunday is Darius Smith. We haven't really talked about him much over the last couple of weeks. He was a great pickup right out of the chute at the trade deadline. He's going to help. He's not Aiden Hutchinson, but he's going to help get to the passer. If that poor kid from Yale or whatever is out there at left tackle this week, I don't even know how to pronounce his last name. But like, give me the pronunciation.
Yeah, Amagaji.
Yes, if Amagaji's out there again, I mean, that poor guy. It was Monday Night Football, and it just false starts and holdings. He wasn't ready, and if he's out there at left tackle again this week, if you're Darius Smith, you've got to be feasting on that. Force Caleb Williams to feel uncomfortable, and especially like you said, cold weather. I know they're at home, but make life miserable for him, and then ball control for the Lions. Yes, it's cliche to say, well, they'll just hold the ball longer so the defense isn't on the field, but actually do it in a way where you're getting everybody involved. Lions offense is so good when St. Brown's touching it. J-Mo, Tim Patrick, Laporta, they're using the other tight end, Brock Wright, and Ben Johnson. Look, let's also be honest here. Ben Johnson, this could be an opportunity for him to show off a little bit in front of Poles, in front of Warren, and do his thing. And so I'm not saying double reverse pass with Penei Sewell as the first play of the game, Lauren, but you're going to see some things, and they got to be careful with the wind and everything else in the conditions. But I do think some creativity will do the Lions some good this weekend.
I do hope we see another double reverse pass with Penei Sewell. That would be like, especially in that game. Like, I wanted to see him at least like get the pass off. And I wasn't rooting for a touchdown there, but like that was cool. Like I appreciate the like real creativity as opposed to like the Bears have tried their forms of creativity, and it's handing it off to Doug Kramer on the goal line and he fumbles. Like that's the difference between these two offenses right now.
Is this a Ben Johnson showcase game? Like, is that and I know you listen to the talk shows and you have your own show every day, but is that who the fans want? Is he number one on the list?
Yeah, he's definitely there's two camps between Ben Johnson and Mike Vrabel. Those are kind of the two number ones, but I think Bears fans lean Ben Johnson generally there. I haven't seen like a real poll of that, but just sort of reading the social media posts, it feels like it. And I mean, that's the thing about like, is it a Ben Johnson showcase game? I mean, I think the Bears and Bears fans, we're already sold that Ben Johnson can get off.
Everybody knows what he can do.
That's not the question, right? The question is, how is he as a head coach? How is he as a leader? How is he going to set the culture of the organization without Dan Campbell, above him, sort of setting the tone that way? And I don't know that there's anything he can do to showcase that in this game, but another nice reminder of how good his offense is certainly would go a long way. It does seem like this Bears ownership group reacts a little bit to public perception there. I mean, it was the Lions beating them on Thanksgiving and national stage where everyone was talking about it that led them to fire Matt Eberflus for the first time, a coach fired in season, because it was a big national game type of situation. So, if a big game from Ben Johnson can keep rallying the fan base around Ben Johnson, maybe that pushes them a little bit more in that direction.
No, I think there's no question about it that everybody knows what he can do, and he's been phenomenal. Ben Johnson has been very picky and he's going to take his time. If that Bears opening, there's obviously been rumors and reports that he wanted the Bears job last year, which wasn't open, but if he feels like Caleb Williams is somebody that he can, put a battery in his back and make him great, he'll go there. But if he also looks up and says, I don't know who's in charge. Is it the McCaskies? Is it Kevin Warren? Is it Ryan Poles? I'm not dealing with that. Whereas in Detroit, Brad Holmes, the GM, works alongside Dan Campbell very well. And I know Troy Aikman kind of talked about that a little bit the other night, how that's been the model for other teams. Arizona does it that way with Monty and with Goodwin. So, we'll see. But Ben Johnson could end up staying if there's no openings. And he'll talk to everybody. But if it's not something to his liking, he'll take his time. We've already seen that.
I will say there's a group of Bears fans that not only want Ben Johnson, but also want Ray Agnew to take over as GM, have him hire Ben Johnson, and just
package deal.
And it's amazing that we've reached the point. Like, I think we need to take a minute. Like, it's amazing we've reached the point where grabbing the Lions GM and Lions front office person and Lions coach is the desirable. Like, we want to emulate the Lions process here is incredible for how far this team and this
It's
organization has come just from a league-wide perspective.
No, it's awesome. And look, Aaron Glenn already is promoting Kelvin Shepard to one day be defensive coordinator in Detroit. If, let's say, AG leaves, or if a team is looking for a defensive coordinator, like you said, the Bears are going to have a whole new staff. Lions have a really, really good coaching staff. And that's the thing that I think can maybe get them through this just gigantic mash unit is, hey, they're 12-2. They control their own destiny, but the coaching staff is really good. And if they can keep it together, maybe still get that 1 seed, it's going to be important. But as you know, Minnesota right on their heels, and certainly Philly's hot. So Lions have to win every game. And I think they'll win this weekend. I think 28-21. I think the Lions will get it done and beat a Bears team that looks like they've got I-94 eyes right now.
That's a great phrase. Yeah, I'm in a similar boat there. Like, I think the Lions will get to 30 easily. I was going to say, even 31-17 is kind of where it feels like to me. Like that, I just don't. Yes, it's going to be cold weather, but I think Ben Johnson's going to eat against this Bears defense that's really struggling. And then the Bears will score a little bit more than they have in recent weeks, get a couple touchdowns maybe, but it's going to be another like too little too late. It might be 17-0 at halftime, and then okay, maybe the Lions take the foot off the gas a little bit. They still score in the second half a couple of times, but the Bears climb back in, and you're like, oh, maybe they got a shot here, but no, not really when it's all said and done.
Matt is awesome. Check him out over at Locked On Lions. And of course, Lauren's awesome. Check him out over at Locked On Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Next up, the Cleveland Browns have been going through really everything this season. It's been a rough year in Cleveland, from Deshaun Watson to Jameis Winston. Now, Dorian Thompson-Robinson taking over the reins as quarterback of the Browns. They'll be facing off against the Cincinnati Bengals, who after the Broncos lost to the Chargers on Thursday night, their playoff hopes still alive. So we're going to be diving in with Jake Lisco and James Rapine of Locked On Bengals and Spencer German of Locked On Browns, who have everything you need to know about the contest.
Locked On Bengals, Locked On Browns. Let's get into keys to victory on this week's crossover presented by PrizePicks, where you can download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Spencer, from the Locked On Browns perspective, let's talk about some keys to victory in this game. What do you think the most important things are for the Browns to watch for or to play for in this game this weekend?
I think off of our conversation, obviously, earlier about just Dorian Thompson-Robinson taking over and being the starting quarterback, getting him comfortable has to be like a top priority. Like they have to be able to, on the opening drive of the game, put something together, even if it doesn't end in a score, like move the football, get him sort of feeling like he can make some easy throws, maybe use his legs a little bit to get him comfortable that way, and give yourself something to build off of, because this offense is only going to go as he goes, and as you're trying to evaluate him, you want to give him the best opportunity to sort of be successful. Obviously, we talked about the Bengals defense and some of the issues that they have. There's an opportunity there to I think, make some plays and do some things if you're DTR. But again, you got to make him comfortable sort of out of the gate. So I think that's probably my number one thing. My second thing relating to the defensive side of the ball has to just revolve around the big plays. Like I mentioned, Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow are playing just out of this world right now. I like that you brought up, Jake. Like usually when these two teams get together, the Browns secondary, there's always some chirping going on between the Bengals wide receivers and the Browns secondary, and they tend to do a pretty good job against these Bengals wide receivers. Now, the biggest thing though, Denzel Ward's been phenomenal. He's probably having the best year of his career. I'm curious to see how they deploy him, because generally he just stays on his side of the field. But every now and then they sort of have him shadow a guy more often. And so I'm curious to see if they do that in this game with Jamar Chase, especially knowing that Martin Emerson Jr. has had some struggles this year. He's kind of been the guy that quarterbacks have targeted this year. And he's dealing with a concussion right now, so he might not even play. And Greg Newsom's obviously on the IR, so he's missing from this matchup. So you're banged up in the secondary, taking away the best you can. Jamar Chase, he's going to get his, but trying to limit that connection, I think, is really important. And then the last thing I would just say is probably some form of Myles Garrett having one of those classic Myles Garrett like takeover games, like we talked about with the Joe Burrow part of this. Like that guy always seems to play really well against Joe Burrow. And I know Joe Burrow's made some sort of joking comments about how good of a player Myles is. And yeah, like there's been instances over and over again where we've seen Miles really throw things off for Joe Burrow and what he wants to do and getting comfortable in a game. If he can generate that pressure, make life difficult for him, slowing down this offense is obviously the main goal. And that starts, I think, with Miles having a big game.
Yeah, not going to get a debate from me when it comes to Myles Garrett or Denzel Ward. Those are the two. It's what makes this matchup so unique to me, especially going up against the Bengals, is just how tough they can make it. And obviously, we'll see on Emerson. We know about Newsome, but yeah, that secondary combined with the defensive front. Obviously, it's led by Myles Garrett, but there are other guys that have made an impact against this Bengals offensive line. And we'll see what the Bengals do. Alex Kappa in concussion protocol. He was at practice on Wednesday. Was not practicing when I was there, but we went through stretch. We know how protocol is. If he does not start at right guard, I would expect Andrew Stuber to make his first career start. So just one of those things where it's like, all right, well, can that work? But that's certainly something that we'll be paying attention to.
Andrew Stuber going to catch some Myles Garrett in his first career start because they're going to move Myles around, and that's not a test that I'm envious of for Stuber coming off the practice squad where he's bounced back and forth for the Bengals this year. Spencer, did you have something you wanted to add in there? I might have cut you off before we get to the Bengals keys.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, you never want to get somebody getting like their first start or like a first time matchup against Myles Garrett. That's never a good thing.
I joked with James. I think we weren't recording at the time, but like they might not get that much worse, even if it's not Kappa, because of the level Kappa's played at in pass protection this year. Like it hasn't been good for him. He's clearly showing the signs of the injuries that he's dealt with over the course of his career. It's been tough to watch Alex Kappa at times this year in pass protection. So, there's always a chance, I guess, there that it doesn't necessarily get worse.
Yeah, it's something new. We'll see if Myles Garrett has the his basketball crossover ready for the Bengals this year.
Gotta expect it, right?
But I mean, Joe, Mike Tomlin mentioned it on Hard Knocks. If you guys are keeping up with that at all, he was like doing a film session, and he was like, "This is the guy that likes to do the crossover. They move around across the defensive line." So it's now a famous moment, I guess, in NFL lore. So
I'll be catching up on Hard Knocks immediately after we finish this recording. James, let's get me to watching Hard Knocks. Let's talk about the Bengals' keys to victory.
Yeah, first one, last one, and really all three can revolve around Myles Garrett. Don't let him wreck the game. He's the best player on the other team. He can be the kryptonite. And so you got to make sure the kryptonite doesn't get to Superman, which is Joe Burrow. And it's really that. So, I mean, the paths for the Bengals to struggle on offense, a lot of them revolve around 95 just completely wrecking the game. So that would be number one. Two, I think this defense, can it continue to do what it did last week, which is force a bunch of turnovers with a young quarterback like Will Levis? Can you do it again? Can Geno Stone, who was limited on Wednesday with a shoulder, we'll see, but I think he's fine. We'll see, though. Can he continue his late season resurgence? Is Cam Taylor-Britt maybe going to have another interception his second in 3 weeks? We'll see. But that would be number two, is taking advantage of a matchup against DTR and who knows, maybe that dead cat bounce we've been talking about, Jake, continues for this defense. And then number three, it's got to be these receivers. We know the Bengals are going to pass it all over, and that's just what they do. And so it's probably going to be a little quicker than normal, which means Joe needs to get rid of it quicker. These receivers need to get open, get separation quickly, and find ways to make plays with the ball in their hands. So, I mean, those are the three, because you still want big plays, but I just don't think you're going to have the longer developing plays. And Joe's been great off script this year, but I don't love Joe holding it for 9 seconds again. As good as that Titans defensive front can be with Jeffrey Simmons, this animal that they're dealing with on Sunday, Myles Garrett, he's just a different beast, man. He's on another level.
Yeah, we'll see if they go back to more of that Dallas game plan where they had to deal with Micah Parsons in that game, who obviously has a Myles Garrett-like impact on passers quite frequently. One of the better pass rushers in the NFL as well. Not trying to rile Browns fans up by comparing him to Myles Garrett. I probably inadvertently did so. Anyway, point is Micah Parsons is really good. And the Bengals in that game used a bit of a different game plan to attack the Dallas defense, knowing they had to get rid of the ball quickly, knowing that there were some matchups that they liked in the Dallas secondary. And with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase out there, yeah, you can maybe dedicate Denzel Ward and a safety to Jamar Chase, and now you have to deal with T. Higgins, and they found some ancillary options in Mike Gesicki and Chase Brown that Joe Burrow's really found, I think, some comfort and confidence throwing to, and those guys have been useful pieces at times when those first two guys were taken away. But I'm still looking for the Bengals to force those targets to Jamar Chase, get him those little touch passes on jet sweeps, pad up those reception numbers, keep him ahead for that triple crown. And I'm only slightly joking when I say that. That's like a only half joke. Mostly serious. Let's get Jamar those touches he needs to do some cool stuff, some historic stuff this season.
Be sure to check out Spencer over at Locked On Browns and Jake and James over at Locked On Bengals, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The New York Giants are an absolute mess right now. You know, they just came off of a blowout loss to the Baltimore Ravens. They have not won at home this season, and they're going to be going up against the Atlanta Falcons, who made a stunning quarterback change. I guess not so stunning if you've watched Kirk Cousins play, but they're still in playoff contention, and they are turning to their rookie first-round pick, who does not have a lot of NFL experience, in Michael Penix Jr. So Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons and Patricia Traina of Locked On Giants talk about the matchup and keys to victory.
Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons, Patricia Traina of Locked On Giants here for Crossover Thursday, presented by PrizePicks. Download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll win $50 instantly when you play $5. So, Patricia, let's wrap up today's Crossover Thursday talking about keys to victory. 3 for the Giants, 3 for the Falcons. I'll give you the floor, as I am such a gracious host, to talk about the Giants' keys to victory.
Well, the good news for the Giants is I don't think they have to worry about any planes flying overhead because the Falcons play in the dome. So that's good news for the Giants. Not that they admit that that's a distraction, but keys to the game. Obviously, you have a rookie quarterback in Michael Penix, and, as good as he might be, rookies can be rattled. So you want to get after him. You want to maybe confuse him, I don't know, again, what the Falcons have done to prepare him with the show team and whatnot, but if you can do some disguising of your defenses and get him off his game a little bit, make him think he's seeing one thing and maybe he's seeing the other, and maybe you can force some mistakes. So that would be certainly key number 1. Key number 2, obviously, stop the run. I don't know how they're going to do it. They've got a makeshift defensive line. The outside linebackers, like I said, Brian Burns is banged up. Kayvon Thibodeau has been, hit and miss against the run, but you got to slow down Bijan Robinson, especially up the middle. Now last week, the Giants kind of did a decent enough job on Derrick Henry, but there were some chunk plays that they gave up. Lamar Jackson got some chunk plays. So you've got to keep those under wraps. And Penix is a guy who can run the ball as well. So you want to make sure that that you're covering that as well. And then I think the other key is just simply for the Giants, stop shooting yourself in the foot. They have had penalties, drop passes, bad throws. The Giants are just not good enough to overcome the mistakes they have made. In every game, there is a catalog of mistakes that I've come up with that if this had been different or that had been different. Now, I'm not expecting perfection, but there's no reason to have like illegal shifts or illegal formations. What are you guys doing in practice if you're not, working on all this stuff? You should get all that out of your system, and it's still going on this late in the season. And look, if the Giants are going to keep making mistakes, they're going to shoot themselves in the foot, and they're not going to give themselves a good chance to win.
Yeah, the Falcons have been dealing with some of those issues as well during their 4-game losing streak. Some of the lack of discipline. We'll see which of these two teams is the more disciplined. That'll probably help them out. But when I look at the Falcons and sort of their 3 keys, it does start with sort of the offensive line in the trenches. And, without Dexter Lawrence, the Falcons have been a little soft up the middle on their offensive line. So I think that helps. But they got to make sure Brian Burns does not take over the game like he has done so many times in their past matchups against Carolina. We'll see what Kayvon Thibodeau does. This is their first time really seeing him. So he also may have some advantageous situations. Obviously, the issue with having that left-handed quarterback is now your blind side is flipped, and Caleb McGarry is not the world's best pass protector. He's really good at running the football or run blocking when it comes to running the football. So I think the Falcons will do their best to sort of chip on that side, but that takes, potentially a tight end out of the offense, like Kyle Pitts. So we'll see how they handle that. I think on the flip side, the second key, I think, is the Falcons need to get pressure. They've done a good job these last 3 weeks. If Drew Lock plays this game, Drew Lock tends to be very volatile. He will put the ball in harm's way. So I think if they can get pressure on Drew Lock, they will be able to create the turnovers that they need to give their young rookie quarterback more opportunities to put points on the board. And that's the third key. You got to put those points on the board, especially when you get to the red zone. The Falcons have basically, I think, been the second worst red zone team during this 5-game slump that they've been on. And so that is one of the areas that you hope to see Michael Penix improve upon. But we know that historically speaking, rookies don't typically operate well in the red zone, at least immediately in the NFL. So that will be a big test for Michael Penix in his Falcons offense. But if Penix can give them just a little shot in the arm, a little adrenaline in the arm when it comes to the red zone, that I think will go a long way to helping this Falcon team walk away with a victory.
Yeah, and you guys also have a new kicker, from what I understand, in addition to that, all that, although that's probably the least of your concerns. But, look, a lot on the line. The Falcons in second place, I believe, right now in the the NFC South. Yes. So you can still make a run. You're not out of the playoffs. The Giants out of the playoffs, but, it is what it is. It's just not the Giants year this year. The 100th anniversary of the New York Giants has just been a year to forget.
Yeah, so we'll see if the Giants can, change the narrative with I don't want to say surprise win, but certainly not a win that many people expect them to win.
Be sure to check out Aaron over at Locked On Falcons for all your Falcons news, and check out Patricia over at Locked On Giants for all your Giants news, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up in the second part of the show, we'll round out the 1 p.m. slate of games here on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. Stay tuned. We have lots to talk about. First, the show is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Earn your game all season long on PrizePicks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. I love going on PrizePicks, seeing everything they have to offer over there. And you can make your holidays bigger and brighter with PrizePicks, the best place to get real money action while watching your favorite sports. You can out up to 1,000 times your money on PrizePicks, and PrizePicks now offers MasterCard for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. Join now because this holiday season, PrizePicks is giving away 2 free picks in December, and they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Picksmas. If you think James Cook will get more than 60 yards or Joe Burrow pass more for 1.5 touchdowns, you can cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this football season when you and your crew win your game on PrizePicks. So for me, in the Browns and Bengals game, I might be going for more on Jamar Chase receiving yards because he has just been balling out this year. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDON NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today. Use code LOCKEDON NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Back here on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show, Kevin Ostreicher still rocking out with you here. Crazy, we're already in Week 16, and it's this time of year where it seems like there's an NFL game each and every day of the week. Obviously, we got Thursday Night Football, Saturday games with Steelers, Ravens, and Houston, Kansas City. Obviously, Christmas, it'll be Baltimore, Houston, Pittsburgh, Kansas City. So that's on a Wednesday. Just a ton of craziness across the league. A wide open NFL, in my opinion, in both conferences. But let's continue the 1 p.m. slate of games here. The Los Angeles Rams and the New York Jets. Just been a terrible year for the Jets overall, and the Rams are looking to get a win here. So we're going to be talking with Travis Rogers of Locked On Rams and John Butchko of Locked On Jets as they dive into which team will be able to come out on top.
All right, it's Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm John, the host of Locked On Jets, along with Travis, the co-host of Locked On Rams. Travis, Rams are on the road, so I'll let you go first. What are your keys to victory in this game?
Yeah, real quick, John, just talking about that line. Rams fans know that the Rams, the second you start thinking that they're going to cover is when they do not. They stay away with the Rams. Go find something else to do. I think the biggest thing for the Rams coming into this one is to get out of there in one piece, to be as cautious as you possibly can, because the Rams' path to the postseason does not necessarily include a win against the Jets. If their last 2 games of the season are both division games, they play Arizona and they play Seattle, both at home in the final 2 weeks of the season. If they win both of those games, regardless of what happens on Sunday morning against the Jets, the Rams are going to get to where they want to get to. So I don't think that you're going to see a whole bunch of exotic things. I don't think you're going to see things that we haven't seen very much. I think it's going to be a very predictable, steady game plan from Aaron Rodgers. That said, I think that they are playing pretty well. If they run the ball effectively and if they make their kicks, I think the Rams are in pretty good shape. I think that last week, despite beating San Francisco, which has kind of been a thorn in their side for the last several years, the biggest thing to come out of that is that their rookie kicker, Josh Carty, finally had a pretty good day. He's been all over the map. He got off to a decent start at the beginning of the season and really struggled for the last few weeks, but he did go 4 for 4 against San Francisco. If they're going to beat Arizona, if they're going to beat Seattle, they're going to need him at some point to make a big kick. So I think that's a big one. If they can get in there, don't turn the ball over. Kyron Williams runs it somewhere between 24 to 28 times, and Josh Carty makes the kicks he's supposed to make. And I'm talking short field goals and PATs. I think the Rams are in pretty good shape.
Well, I think that the Jets are going to be in this game. The Jets have only been blown out 3 times all season long. They may be 4-10, but really the only times they've been blown out were week 1 against San Francisco, the game they played in Pittsburgh on Sunday night in October, and then the game I mentioned in November in Arizona. So I don't know, maybe that's a bad omen because 2 of those 3 games were against NFC West competition. But I think a lot of elements. I think one of the things you laid out is the Rams finishing the season against NFC West competition. I think I always wonder a little bit about the West Coast team playing the 10 a.m. kickoff on the road.
McVay's pretty good at that. He's kind of the guy that bucks that trend. I want to say he's 8-2 in that situation. He's actually pretty good going east and playing early.
That's very good stats. So that undercuts that point. I do think, cold weather. I think the Jets will be in this
cold weather is a good one though, John. The Rams have been historically lousy when the weather is cold, so that could be a big deal.
Yeah. So I think for the Jets, number one is help on Jared Verse. Jets have another rookie tackle. Jets have a rookie tackle going against them. It'll be a matchup of a couple rookie first round picks. Olu Fashanu, who took over for Tyron Smith a few weeks back, and he's been good. He's moved around the line this year. He started at right tackle. He began the season the backup. Morgan Moses, who's the right tackle, got injured in week 3 against the Patriots. So Fashanu got some time at right tackle. He played some guard and really struggled. Kind of like his strength was an issue. Since he's taken over for Tyron Smith, he's played very well. In fact, 2 of the last 3 games, he has not given up a pressure. But I think that you got to give pressure. You got to give him help against Jared Verse. I think if there's a game record for the Rams in this game, it's Jared Verse. So I think you want to give Fashanu plenty of help. Aside from that, I think a lot of it's focusing on the fundamentals. This Jets defense has been a mess all season long, and I think 2 big issues have been tackling and communication on the back end. I think those are 2 things that the Jets need. In fact, those would be my keys 2 and 3 is Jets need to, first of all, make sure they tackle well. It's been a week-to-week thing. There are some weeks where they've tackled terribly, other weeks where they've tackled well. Some weeks it's been an emphasis of practice. I think this is the type of week where it should be an emphasis of practice. And then I think maybe the Jets just need to simplify their coverages, but they just have too many busts on the back end. And there were a couple against Jacksonville that could have cost them the game that Mac Jones just did not hit. There was an open guy that Mac Jones just did not hit. So I think a lot of these are basics, but the little things have cost the Jets all season long. This is a team with a 3-7 record in 1-score games. And it's because they don't do the little things like that. They don't communicate on the back end on defense. They don't tackle effectively. And that's how you end up with a record like this. And that's why the Rams are playing this game, and it's significant for them, and it's not that significant for the Jets.
Yeah, the Rams have an opportunity to do something that has never happened in the history of the NFL, and that's be 3 games under 500 in back-to-back years and make the playoffs both years. That's never happened. That's something that if they can finish off this season with, if they win they control their own fate. You beat Arizona, you beat Seattle, you go to the playoffs. But they were 3-6 a year ago. They were 1-4 this year, and like we kind of started this whole thing, John, this is a great testament to Sean McVay and his culture building and his ability to continue to move forward and figure things out. Even though they looked pretty dire early, the Rams, you would have told me that they were 8-6 and had their own fate in their hands, I wouldn't have believed you. And here we are.
And just as was the case in 2020, 4 years ago when these teams played in December, be a fair number of Jets fans rooting for the Rams for that draft positioning. Yeah. The Jets hurt themselves draft wise last week when they beat Jacksonville. So we'll see. I think a lot of Jets fans are going to be Rams fans this week, but a lot of Jets fans will still root for the team. Kind of an even divide in the fan base, but we'll see what happens.
We'll take what we can get.
Check out Travis over at Locked On Rams and John over at Locked On Jets, part of Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Next up, the Tennessee Titans and Indianapolis Colts face off in a clash of AFC South teams. Both teams not having the best year. Tennessee, it's been brutal. Quarterback change again. Will Levis out, Mason Rudolph in, and the Colts, their playoff hopes, it's not looking great. So we have Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts and Tyler Rowland of Locked On Titans. So we'll dive into everything you need to know about the game.
And welcome back, everyone, to Crossover Thursday, which is presented by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play 5. Tyler, I know we haven't talked too much about the game that's actually happening on Sunday. So in this essential preseason game between our two beloved teams, what are the 3 most important keys, maybe not to winning, Tyler, but that just for you to feel better, I guess, after Sunday?
Well, I'll just be upfront and honest. I'd rather talk about the 3 keys to winning because there's not much that can make me feel better about this season right now. It's essentially impossible, but I think the Titans have to stop the Colts run game. The Titans have been destroyed by mobile quarterbacks all year long. They just cannot handle it, whether it be, Jaden Daniels, whether it be Drake May, whether it be Sam Darnold in the pocket looking like prime Mike Vick. I mean, it doesn't matter what you want to call it. Any quarterback with an ounce of mobility to them has devastated the Titans. They just can't figure it out. So if you don't stop the +1 run game of Anthony Richardson, you're in trouble. And I think on the offensive side of the ball, the Titans just have to be able to run the ball. I mean, I know stop the run the ball, but they're not a good team. You can't count on them to do those things, to go further down the well, to say, hey, you need to be good on the red zone. Hey, you need to worry about this coverage. We're not that far down the line to care about those things right now. So if the Titans don't run the ball and stop the run, they probably have no chance to win whatsoever. I think ultimately special teams, I feel like in these division games, weird things happen. Special teams play a big factor in these games, and the Titans have been god-awful on special teams all year long. We're talking historically bad special teams. When you look at EPA and DVOA and all the alphabet things, it is a historically bad special team season. They've improved a little bit as of late, especially in coverage. But if the Titans allow a big time special teams blunder to impact this game, a big return, a blocked punt, something like that, I don't expect the Titans to get one because they haven't gotten any big plays in special teams all year. But if they allow one to happen, they are in trouble. So run the ball, stop the run, clean on special teams, and the Titans at least have a chance to win a 17-16, game over the Colts.
Oh man, we're talking high school coaches with these teams because that's what they need right now. It's just
some would say Brian Callahan is a high school coach. There are Titans fans out there that would say that. So
we are getting that too for sure over here in Indy. But when it comes to the most important keys for the Colts in this game on offense, develop some kind of layup game. We got to get everybody to the layup line, whether that's completing short passes, whether that's being consistent in the run game, win first and second down for the first time this season. It would be great to see this offense just put together some success rate on offense. Let's get to 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, because for all of Richardson's flaws, you can't stop him in 3rd and 1 and 3rd and 2 and 3rd and 3. 3rd and 10, though, it's going to be a punt or it's going to be a turnover. That's what's going to happen with this Colts offense. So we got to get something going in the layup game, get something to where we can get to 2nd and 1, 2nd and 2, 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2. And that's how you can keep this offense on track and going. We've seen glimpses this season from the Colts, but they have not been able to put together 4 quarters of it. And that's going to lead me over to my second key to victory: 4 quarters of good football for the first time this year. There has not been a single game. Yeah, there has not been a single game this season where the Colts have had 4 good quarters of play. Honestly, there has not been a single game this season where they've had 4 consistent quarters of either end of the spectrum. It's something. Last week against the Denver Broncos, first and second quarter, really good football, up 13-7 at halftime against a potential playoff team. Second half one of the worst offensive outputs you've ever seen in the history of football. That is just what this Colts team has been. We've seen it multiple times this year where first half does not lead to success in the second half, first quarter does not lead to success in the second quarter, and stuff like we've even seen games where against the Patriots, dreadful all the way up until the fourth quarter, come all the way back and get a victory in the fourth quarter. Let's get 4 consistent quarters of football for the first time this year and actually look like a real NFL team for all 4 quarters. And the last one, when it comes to this Colts defense, please squeeze the short passing game in this one. The Colts have had some very volatile defensive performances this season. Really good last week against the Denver Broncos. And when you're going against a quarterback like Mason Rudolph is not a Josh Allen type. He's not going to run around in the backfield. He's not going to throw off platform 30 yards down the field.
Right.
He's not even going to attempt many vertical passes. But he will get this offense moving if he can hit the screen game, if he can hit the quick slants, if he can get that ball out of his hand quickly. So get tight on these receivers, play close, and be competitive on those underneath throws to make life difficult for this Titans offense. So, yeah, when it comes to this Colts 3 keys of victory here, 4 consistent quarters, get into manageable third downs on offense, and on defense, take away the short passing game, which Mason Rudolph wants to live in on this game here. But Tyler, before we go, do you want to do a prediction by any chance for this one?
Yeah, I'll predict nothing but sadness for both fan bases for the rest of the season. That's my prediction.
My prediction is the Colts play way too many veterans in this game. They care too much about winning this game, and they end up ultimately winning. I don't know what the score is going to be in this one because, again, the Colts, we don't know if they're going to get 4 good quarters, 3 good,
the Titans need to lose the game. I mean, they need Abdul Carter. So, let's go. I'm all in,
Are both fan bases rooting for their teams to lose, I guess? So the Colts want the final hammer.
But it's too late for the Colts. They're not gonna jump into the top 5 or anything. They're kind of in their range, and I don't know if it's a good range to be in this draft, if I'm honest. But that's obviously conversations for the off season. But I think if you let the fans pick, they would both rather lose the game. I think for sure.
I think for the Colts, you almost want to lose it just so it finally shuts out the playoff conversation, because right now they can still look at it optimistically and say, hey, the Colts have 3 games against teams that have combined 6 wins this year, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And the Chargers have 3 tough games coming up, and maybe Herbert's out for all 3 of them. So the
Do you
Colts
want to get drubbed by the Bills?
Yeah.
600-10.
We just lost by 18
wild card
to the
weekend.
Broncos.
Yeah, and then lose having a top 12 pick. You don't want that. You don't want that, Colts fans.
Yeah, and do you want Chris Ballard coming out here and be look, we were a playoff team. We deserve to be there. This team is in the
everyone around.
Yeah. But regardless, everybody, this should be a fun one on Sunday between our 2 teams. At least we get to see some of these young guys out there. Colts get to see their young quarterback trying to put one final case out there for him to, get next year and maybe beyond that. You get some other young rookies, Latu still playing and stuff. You guys still have Skoronski and Latham out there, and Tavondre Sweat, who's been a fantastic player in a lot of ways this year.
Yeah, and some young linebackers we could get a look at again, which is what really matters now is the young players moving forward.
Yep. So in this glorified preseason game, there is still some things to watch this weekend, and we'll see who comes victorious. I mean, look, at least we get some bragging rights if we beat you, or you guys get bragging rights. Regardless,
don't want to get swept.
Check out Zach over at Locked On Colts and Tyler over at Locked On Titans, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Rounding out the 1 p.m. slate of games, the Arizona Cardinals and the Carolina Panthers. Bryce Young has made the Panthers look fun again. I mean, he's having a resurgence after being benched. That's been awesome. The Cardinals, they've had moments of greatness and moments of not so great stuff happen this season. So we're going to be diving in with Alex Clancy of Locked On Cardinals, Julian Council of Locked On Panthers, with what each team needs to do to pull out a win.
Back here on this Locked On NFL Crossover Thursday, presented by our friends over at PrizePicks. Download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. I'm Julian Council, the host of Locked On Panthers. He is Alex Clancy, the host of Locked On Cardinals. The 3-11 Carolina Panthers facing off against the 7-7 Arizona Cardinals, who right now are 1 game behind the 8-6 Rams and 8-6 Seahawks, 1 game above the 49ers at 6-8. And 2 games behind the Washington Commanders for the last spot in the wild card, as Green Bay is clearly going to go to the playoffs. I don't think anybody's concerned about whether that's going to happen. Minnesota also, they could win the division still. Detroit with the injuries they got going on. So Detroit and Minnesota with 12 wins are both going to the playoffs. So one spot still out there on the line, potentially in the wild card, but I feel like the Commanders got a hold of that. So what Arizona's going to need to do, probably win these last 3 games. And looking at the series history, you brought it up earlier, Alex, Arizona won the last time back in 2022. Oh, actually, no, wait. Yes. No, that's not true. Why does this say that was a Cam Newton I'm back game? So Carolina won that game. So I'm looking at the Panthers website right now, and they have that as a loss for Carolina. So that's not right. 2021, it has Carolina winning 34-10, has them winning in 2020, 31-21. Then, oh my God, this game back in 2019, 38-20, Carolina win, which is when everybody announced or anointed Kyle Allen as a franchise, and the most annoying fall I've ever gone through. And I will never forgive the people in this fan base who thought that guy could play. But Carolina's owned Arizona recently, and we'll see if that trend continues. For it to not continue, Alex, what 3 things at minimum should or do the Cardinals need to do on Sunday to win?
The Cardinals need to run the ball effectively against a team that they should be able to run the ball effectively against. That's one. Number 2, the Cardinals need to run the ball effectively against a team that they can run the ball effectively against. And then number 3, I wish that more people knew when I screamed blitz all night what that really means with Remember the Titans. Like, I know you do. They need to eviscerate the left side, predominantly that offensive line, and just make Bryce Young's life a living hell. Like, it's cutting the head off the snake is what I call it, where it's just they need, like, and I know the pass rush for them has been a weak spot would be nice to say about the Cardinals, but what Jonathan Gannon and Nick Rallis do with the exotic blitz packages that they put together, whether it be, Kazir White and Budda Baker or Garrett Williams and Max Melton, like, they get weird with it. And that's something that they're going to need to do on top of running the ball. And they should win in pseudo-convincing fashion. If they can't run the ball, that's when the question marks come into play.
I love the fact that here we are with a Bill Yost reference on the show. Yost! Better not take my boy out, Yost! You blitz all night. Yeah. Well, I mean, is there any vendetta going on here? Because that's what was happening. And remember the Titans, he was mad. So what's the vendetta over here at Carolina side other than just losing the last couple of games?
I mean, it's everything. It's like, here's the thing. The Cam Newton,
I'm back.
Yeah, it's just, and then Patrick Peterson, and me having to deal with Patrick Peterson saying that he's, CB1, he just gets abused in the NFC Championship game. They lose by 100. It's just like, listen, this is the time where the Panthers should be got. Like, this is one, because listen, what the Panthers have, like 2 less wins than Chicago after that trade?
Yeah. It's not been great for them. So Bears are 5-8 right now? Yeah. I had somebody walking in while doing the show. That's why I was like, if you saw me waving away. But
as long as it's not a seizure, we're good. Yeah. So
I'm all good. But I'm thinking about it because, like, some of these games, what for you, before I get to the Panthers, like 3 things off the top of my head. Yeah. The Ryan Lindley game where they had to come in here, face off against a 7-8-1 Carolina Panthers team. Like, does that one bite too? More because I feel like obviously 2015 has to hurt more because you're right there on the cusp. But that was a Panthers team that was 15-1.
Yeah,
losing to a 7-8-1 team is that one maybe a little bit more?
No,
I like what the hell?
One. No, okay. I think it's the one because of the relevancy factor. It was Kyler Murray in 2020. I think you mentioned the Teddy Bridgewater game where it's like, Teddy is just going to be an all-world guy from Louisville again. And, it's just something that, the Cardinals are going to have to eat it. Budda Baker did miss that game. I think my memory serves me. And the Cardinals were that was just a Cliff Kingsbury coach game, baby. That's all that was. And it's just like the Cardinals, their roster wasn't great and they weren't these huge favorites. They may not have been favorites going into that game, but games like that are games that this organization never wins. And this is one where you have an extra little leg up because Carolina's 1 year away from being like, that's why going into Sunday, it's like, just go do what you're supposed to do. They did it against New England this past week. Go do it again on the road and keep your season alive. Because if they don't, we're going to be having weird conversations.
Teddy Bridgewater that day, 26-37, 276 yards, tutty, or 2 of them. 1 interception, 98.5 rating, and the Panthers also ran all over the Cardinals, running for, 100 and I can't find it. They're in for a lot of yards. So yeah, it's just a weird history these two teams have had recently, where they're both at the top of the NFC, and in Carolina still winning those games. One of them that you would not have thought they would have won as a 7-8-1, but we've seen that NFC South division champion. Not even NFC South. Like, we had the Marshawn Lynch earthquake game, and when that place almost fell apart, and that's crazy, how that's all happened. So we've seen it multiple times happen with NFC South and West opponents facing off in the wild card round of the playoffs. But looking at Carolina, it's pretty simple to me, man. You got to take care of the football this week. You cannot turn it over 4 times. And it's just the NFL. It's football in general. If you turn it over 4 times, you're going to lose. Now, you're going to turn it over 4 times, and you're going to give it 200 yards on the ground, you're going to lose. So it's going to come down to taking care of the football from Bryce Young's perspective, which he has done. Aside from that first start back against Denver where he was thrown in there, hadn't been really getting those first-team reps at the 2 interceptions, he's taking care of the ball. 1 interception against the Saints, that was more on Leggett, not holding on to the football, having it just stripped away from him by the Saints defender. Then Bryce had the pick a couple weeks ago against Philadelphia. Not a great throw on that play. But other than that, he had taken care of the ball. Then last week, fumbled twice, throws a couple of picks. Just did not look good, not smart decisions, but there's been a lot of good, and I don't think last week should wash away what he's done. But if it happens again this week, then there's going to be concerns about him moving forward the rest of the season. Really, that decision Carolina has to make heading into 2025, got to stop the run. Arizona's 7th in the NFL right now in rushing yards. James Conner's been good. Kyler Murray would know he can do. Panthers' run defense sucks, and it's not ever going to be good this season. I continuously have people ask me, how can it get better? It's like, dude, they played 14 games. This is who they are. They're not getting better. Shaq Thompson, blown Achilles. Derek Brown, torn meniscus. They're gone. And even if they were here, I still don't think it's going to be a top 25 run defense. It's been atrocious. And then you got to capitalize in the red zone. Had a little issues there when they were there last week early on. That was when they had the fumble with Bryce Young. Really find a way to get out early, capitalize in the red zone, score a touchdown there. And then I think that can give them a lot of momentum in this game against a team that is desperate. And Carolina needs to match that desperation against Arizona. So that's really 6 things, but it's more than 1 or 3 things the Panthers need to do to win this game. So again, lines at 4.5 going into Sunday. How do you feel? Do you feel like this is a game Arizona takes away, or you think it's going to be just another letdown against the Panthers with the Cardinals playing against them?
Yeah, if I were to put a wager on FanDuel with this, I'd take the money line minus 250 or whatever it would be. I would not be laying points on the road in the morning window in Carolina. Weird things happen in the Carolinas and Florida when you go across country and you're a West Coast team. It's I'm cautiously optimistic that the Cardinals could take care of business, win by 10 that ends up being a field goal late, something like that. But I don't know, man. They're not a trustworthy team in the ways they need to be trustworthy, which is run the ball whenever. And they played Carolina, really bad run defense a month ago at that time, and they were stymied. I think they ran for less than 50 yards. So it's they need to be able to take advantage of the weaknesses of opposition, and they've done it at times, but they don't do it frequently enough for me to be like, oh, yeah, book it. James Conner 120 touch.
Can't trust him. We'll see. I think it's kind of nice to see Arizona actually right there in the thick of things. I have talked about on this show this week, while I always want to see the team win, because I've been doing this since the 2020 season, Alex. The Panthers are 17-59.
Be sure to go to Locked On Cardinals with Alex for all your Cardinals coverage, and to Locked On Panthers with Julian for all your Panthers coverage, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. That's it for the 1 p.m. slate of games. That's not it for us on the Ultimate NFL pregame, so we have a lot to talk about still. There are a couple of 4 p.m. games that you will not want to miss out on, so be sure to stay tuned. A lot to get to on the Ultimate NFL pregame show. First, the show is brought to you by the College Football Playoff. It's that time of year. The College Football Playoff is back, and with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the College Football Playoff begins December 21st, starting at the College Football Playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers looked up at the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the College Football Playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. Can Josh Allen really wrap up the MVP against the New England Patriots in Week 16? I'm Kevin Ostreicher. This is the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show where, with the help of our local experts, we bring you keys to victory, key predictions, and so much more leading up to game time. So with this 4 o'clock slate of games, Josh Allen, this game was moved because of Josh Allen. They're going to face off the Buffalo Bills against the New England Patriots, who, of course, Drake May. I think the Patriots have a lot to be excited about there, but, of course, this is not their season. Josh Allen in a fierce battle with Lamar Jackson and even Saquon Barkley for MVP. We're going to be talking here with Joe Marino of Locked On Bills and Mike Debate of Locked On Patriots and talk about if the Patriots can pull the upset or if the Bills just have this one in the bag.
I'm Joe Marino, host of Locked On Bills, joined by Mike Debate, the host of Locked On Patriots, here for a crossover Thursday preview of Bills, Patriots, and crossover Thursday is presented by PrizePicks. Download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. It's time to talk path to victory, but Mike, I teased that I had a very important question for you, and it's time for me to ask that question. I'm not sure if you saw this, but the Bills have announced that they are debuting a new uniform combination for this game, and it's not anything that's never been seen before, but it is a combination that we haven't. It's the same white helmet that you typically see. It's their red color rush jersey. So just imagine a regular Bills jersey. Instead of it being blue, it's red, but it's with white pants, the typical white pants that they would normally wear. So white hat, red jersey, white pants. A lot of Bills fans are saying, you know what? That looks to me like the old Patriots uniforms. And my question for you is, like, does your mind go there when you see, I don't know if you've seen him or not, but does your mind go there? I'm a big uniform guy, so I'm sorry if I'm dragging you into this. So welcome to this conversation. But I'll answer this for myself, because when I think about my early Patriots memories, I think about Drew Bledsoe in a silver helmet and kind of a royal blue jersey. You know what I'm talking about. That's what I think. I don't think about Andre Tippett and whatever those, I like seeing the throwbacks. I think they're good, but I don't associate the two. I'm curious for your take on this.
Yeah, I think Patriots fans noticed that right away. As a matter of fact, my good friend Nick Fitzy-Stevens over at WEEI said that did Pat Patriot know that his wardrobe was raided over the course of the last week? No, look, yeah, there are similarities. There's no question about it, especially with the white pants, with the red, white, and blue stripe. It is very reminiscent of the old Patriots uniforms. Those uniforms are revered up here in New England. Really? They are goated, for lack of a better term. Whenever there's a throwback, there's a different buzz, a different vibe when it comes to this New England team. And I, for one, am always surprised by it. First of all, I do think it's an amazing look. I really wish the Patriots would return to it, because I think it's just the cleanest look and really such a great logo. Everything about it, I love from an aesthetic purpose what that logo brings. But not so many great memories in that uniform, other than a trip to the Super Bowl in 1986 that ended with a drubbing from the Chicago Bears, 46-10. Patriots didn't really start to form their image as the New England Patriots until that Flying Elvis logo and that silver helmet and those blue jerseys. And then, of course, the iconic Brady era, Belichick era jerseys that I know Bills fans know very well.
Yeah, those are the ones.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't like those ones, Mike.
You want to see them? You want to see them? Get them out of here. Yeah,
nightmares, Mike.
But bottom line, I think there are definite similarities. And, the Bills right now are the kings of the mountain. They have a right to troll the Patriots if they want to do it. We've certainly done our share in the past. So you can dish it out. We can take it. But it'll be good to see that uniform combination. It's just good that the Patriots didn't zero in taking those with them on the road, because that could have been a little difficult to see both teams in red jerseys, Joe.
Yeah, it'd be tough to see. So they do this every December. They wear the reds every December for, I think, the game that's closest to Christmas. So I don't know. I don't know if it's a true troll job or whatever. You said Flying Elvis? Is this? I've never heard this phrase. Is that what we call?
Patriots fans will tell you that logo right now that is on the Patriots helmet currently is affectionately known as the Flying Elvis. The designer, the graphic designer that designed the logo, apparently had the image of Elvis Presley in his head when he designed the face for that Patriot Minuteman, that flying image of the Minuteman hat. So, yeah, that's what it's called here in New England. Some Buffalo fans may know that, but may have just given your listeners a little wisdom and counsel they didn't have before.
Well, listen, I can hear Ross Jackson in my ears right now saying you're supposed to do keys to victory in segment 3. So, Mike Debate, let's do keys to victory here.
when you think about the Patriots on the road, 14-point dogs, what's got to go right here for them to pull off an upset?
You mean besides praying for a blizzard? I mean, right now at this point, no, I'm kidding. Look, bottom line, if the Patriots want to be competitive in this game, they have to come out and they have to establish the run first. This is a team that is predicated on running the ball to try to open up things for Drake May in play action. If there is a situation where the Patriots can take advantage of some of the deficiencies the Bills have had when it comes to defending the run, they've got a shot. But see, the problem is, Joe, is that the Bills are always so far ahead. No team really gets a chance to try to exploit this. If the Patriots can keep it close early, they have a puncher's chance to maybe keep this one close and hang around a little bit. So get Ramondre Stevenson the ball, get Antonio Gibson the ball, try to make things happen for Drake May and see what happens. The second step to that is give the ball to Drake May and let him try to put the game in his own hands. Give him the opportunity to make plays. If the Bills are going to try to use zone to try to keep him from testing the deep ball, give him the opportunity to try to test the intermediate areas of the field, see what the kid can do. If they're going to play him in man, Drake has already proven on more than one occasion you need to account for his whereabouts when you're playing man-to-man. It's not all about covering the receivers. Drake can tuck the ball and run for big yardage. A couple of weeks ago, he had a 41-yard run against man coverage. So this is a kid that can make things happen in that open field. Not going to be easy because the Buffalo Bills are as fundamentally sound as any team in the league. And you mentioned the turnover differential, and you mentioned their inability to turn or their lack of ability right now to turn the football over, which is a great thing for them to have. Patriots have to try to adopt a little bit of that. That's my last key to victory. Don't turn the ball over, protect the football, and stop being penalized in key moments of the game. The Patriots have hurt themselves far too much with penalties on key offensive drives that could have resulted in surefire points, but then again have to be backed up because of inexperience and bad coaching in those situations. The Pats have to clean that up. If they hit all three of those, they might be able to keep this one within swinging distance. If they fail at any one of those three, the Bills are off to the races.
I think you got the right idea, Mike, especially coming in with a run-heavy approach, shorten the game, keep Josh on the sideline. And the Bills are not a team that I think is very consistent with their run defense. So that I think is the right formula. For the Buffalo side of things, I think number one is not taking anything for granted. I know that this is 3-11 versus 11-3. These teams certainly have different fates this year, but this is still a divisional game. And I'm old enough to remember the Patriots last year beating the Bills. And I think about it all the time. Mac Jones at a game-winning drive against the Bills. It happened, all right? And the results were not all that different with the Patriots, having a poor record, the Bills being the 2 seed in the AFC. One of their losses was to this Patriots team. And look at the AFC North. The Browns not having a great year. They have 2 wins this year against division rivals in Baltimore and Pittsburgh, right? Like division games are just different.
It's true.
And I know that it's not Bill Belichick, but Gerard Mayo's been part of this for a long time. He knows McDermott. He knows the Buffalo Bills. So I don't think you can come into this game and take a single thing for granted. I think a champion's mindset is 1-0 and focus on the challenge that's ahead of you. The Bills are certainly in contention for the 1 seed. They have big time aspirations. The only thing you can affect right now is this game on Sunday against the New England Patriots. So take nothing for granted. I think number 2 is to continue to take advantage of your full slate of weapons. And you have a 3-game runway right now, 2 against the Patriots, 1 against the Jets before the postseason. And making sure that you are established with how you want to move the football, right? Again, you're not coming in. This isn't a scrimmage. This isn't 7-on-7. You're not trying things out. But this is your tune-up opportunity, if you will, to make sure that your offensive balance, and I don't mean run-to-pass ratio or target, I mean just the balance of how you want to be is leveled out, right? And I think you have an opportunity to make sure, okay, this is how we want to deploy Keon Coleman with Amari Cooper, with Dalton Kincaid, with Dawson Knox, with Khalil Shakir, with Curtis Samuel. They really haven't. There's a lot of players. There hasn't been a lot of games where they're all together at the same time, and they're all healthy finally. This is your runway to get it all clicking at its highest level going into the postseason. And then number 3, I think the Bills have to figure some things out on defense. And whether they want to use 3 linebackers, the Bills are very much a nickel defense that sometimes runs dime, right? Like 20% dime, 1% 3 linebackers, and the rest is nickel. And they showed last week against Detroit that they will run some 3 linebackers.
if that's part of your mix and you're thinking about future dates with Kansas City or Baltimore or Pittsburgh, other heavy personnel teams, the Lions again down the road, maybe, get your 3 linebacker stuff figured out. This is your chance to rep it. Are you still going to want to work on your dime? Is Cam Lewis your best dime back? Figure that out. And then the Bills, I think, have been just mediocre on third downs. I think they're around 20th in third down stop percentage on defense. And I think Drake May's best stuff, when I'm most impressed with Drake May, is like, oh my God, some of his best moments come on high leverage downs, like third downs. And that goes back to North Carolina. In the preseason, it stood out to me. It stood out to me at times watching him this year, where the Bills sometimes, like 3rd and 11 is like the worst down they could possibly be in. So I think figuring some of this stuff out and how you want to play in these situations so that you're optimized going into the postseason is absolutely critical. So take nothing for granted. Continue to use your full slate of weapons in the offense, and then kind of fine tune your defensive philosophy.
Very well said. And one thing that I will piggyback on, when you mentioned efficiency on third down, you're absolutely right. The Patriots can make things happen on third down when they give Drake May the opportunity to do so. They did not do so at any point in the game last week, and they were 0 for 6 on third down. If Buffalo's smart, they try to contain that, try to confuse the New England Patriots, keep them off balance. And if that happens, then it takes away a lot of Drake's ability to go off script. So could be some inside information there that might help Buffalo on Sunday. Not that they need any more of it.
Be sure to keep it locked in with Joe on Locked On Bills for all your Bills coverage, and keep it locked in with Mike on Locked On Patriots for all of your Patriots coverage. Part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Next up, big NFC matchup. The Minnesota Vikings now have a shot to get that number 1 seed in the NFC after Detroit has just been absolutely decimated with injuries. They're going up against the Seattle Seahawks, who have been a very hot and cold team this season. So Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings and Corbin Smith of Locked On Seahawks talk about which NFC team will pick up a big, much-needed win.
Crossover Thursday, Locked On Seahawks, Locked On Vikings. I'm Corbin Smith of Locked On Seahawks. He's Luke Braun, Locked On Vikings. It is time to get to our keys to victory. And obviously, the Vikings have been very successful at winning football games this year, Luke, winning 12 of their first 14. Very good position to win the NFC North, especially since the Detroit Lions have turned into a real-life MASH unit at this point. It feels like this is for the taking for the Vikings. Still a huge game to make that happen for Minnesota, though, in Seattle. From your perspective, what are the keys to victory for the Vikings to come in, maybe match some of the things that Green Bay did, but where are some areas that you think they absolutely have to hit to beat this Seahawks team playing in the Pacific Northwest?
I'm going to sound like such a boomer. I'm going to sound like so boring here, but it's got to start up front and physicality in the trenches. Seeing that Green Bay game, that's my understanding is let's push them around. Can we push them around? But like I kind of mentioned before, can the Vikings push them around? They've gotten themselves pushed around a little bit by Arizona, by even, units like a lot of backups in Los Angeles pushed them around a little bit. Atlanta pushed them around a little bit. They're kind of not supposed to be able to do that. So yeah, I'm not sure. I think that's like an X factor for me is who gets the physical push, who really can beat each other up. But one thing the Vikings have done all year long, and in every single game they've won, and even the 2 that they've lost, you've been playing Vikings football, not the other guy's football. You've been playing football predicated on explosives. You have been in, let's make this game decided on how good you are at beating the blitz. The Lions were great at beating the blitz and they won, but it has to be down to that. And, they have not been, they didn't, that game wasn't a Lions game as much as it was a Vikings game. And the Lions went in to US Bank Stadium, played Vikings football and won. Congrats to them. That's a heck of a feat. And I think LA kind of did something similar. I will say the Vikings historically very bad on the West Coast at weird times. That travel, the Pacific time zone change, I think is a genuinely important home field advantage. I'm sure you guys are used to hearing that, but the Vikings haven't won in Seattle since 2006. So they're like that Chester Taylor was the last. Remember the Chester Taylor game? That was the last time they won in Seattle.
Unfortunately, I remember that game really well.
Yeah, almost 20 years ago, that one. It's been that long. And otherwise, it's been a whole bunch of weird primetime games and Action Green and Laquan Treadwell busted coverages and sort of a bunch of weird stuff. The more normal this game can be, the more it's just about finding, 15-yard chunks and like the better things go for the Vikings. But for the Seahawks to take this, they have to prevent the Vikings from making it a Vikings game. They have to, no, we're not going to do this blitz thing, right? You have to like find a way to dissuade that blitz. But yeah, that's asking Brian Flores to be a normal person, and that ain't going to happen.
Yeah, from Seattle's perspective on defense, I'm basing this off of watching a ton of Sam Darnold over the years, and I feel like even this season, as well as he has played, when opponents have been able to create interior pressure up front, that is where the interceptions and the bad decisions are coming from Sam Darnold. And I look at Seattle's front. You mentioned the physicality for one quarter, and that ended up being a huge difference. I don't know what happened to Seattle in that first quarter. That was not the Seahawks defense I had seen the last 4 weeks. They held Josh Jacobs to 21 rushing yards in the last 2 quarters, though. That is the defense that I have been watching.
So they found it.
They found it. Leonard Williams is having an all-pro season. The dude has been absolutely unblockable at times. And even in that game against Green Bay, he had 4 tackles netting 1 or fewer yards in the second half by himself. He's got 7 sacks. If he can create problems for that interior line that, as you mentioned, is having a harder time keeping Sam Darnold clean as of late, if Leonard Williams can create pressure, and Jaron Reed has had a good season, hasn't had the sack numbers, but he's been effective. Byron Murphy, second, is starting to play better. To me, that is the biggest key, is if they can get pressure on Sam Darnold with their interior pass rush, that takes away some of those explosives because your pocket is collapsing down on you, and those long developing routes can't get open. So I think that is going to be key. And on offense, you mentioned being boring. Look, my listeners at this point are probably like, dude, stop saying it. It's not going to happen, but run the damn football. I am so tired of watching this team week in, week out. If 1 or 2 runs don't work, you know what? We're just going to turn into an air raid offense. Throw it.
Vikings have, by EPA per play, the best run defense in the league right now.
But I think Seattle cannot come into this game and say, we're just going to sling it all over the place. Especially
you're going to have to. Like, they do stop the run. You're going to have to eat a 2-yard run and say, we're sticking with it if you're going to stick with it.
You've got to continue running the football. And look, like I said, they ran for 170-plus yards. Arizona's run defense was the number 1 run defense in the previous 5 games when they did that. That is a physical football team, and they were pushing them around. You've got to play some bully ball in Seattle. And I think that the offensive line has shown in flashes recently they can do that, but the offensive coordinator's got to let those guys lather up, and he has not been willing to do that. So those are the 2 big keys to me. Interior pressure on Sam Darnold. I think if they do that, it really takes away a lot of the things the Vikings like to do, and it can really stir up some panic from Sam Darnold, even at this stage of his career. He still will throw some picks and make some throws that are gambles because he's a risk taker. And you have a opportunistic secondary, and I think they have to run the ball. I'm not saying they need to run for 170 yards, but they have to run the football and stick with it and get some play action opportunities to take some pressure off Geno, because he's not going to be 100% either. You've got to have your run game going so that you can get some of that passing game going that Seattle should be able to do when they have not consistently been able to get going this year, because I think Ryan Grubb has not helped them by simply saying, hey, you know what, run game is optional. I don't care. You can't do that in this football game.
So 2 pass happy teams. The Vikings do that too. I mean, they will go an entire quarter and run the ball twice. And that's not like not sticking with it. The run game will be working plenty well, and Kevin O'Connell just gets into 7-on-7 mode and is just like, but what if we tried to throw a touchdown 3 times? Let's do that. And then sometimes they do throw a touchdown 3 times, and it's like, okay, well, I can't argue with you now. But
Seattle hasn't had that success. So
yeah, I mean, that's, I think, a huge difference. And that's why, you know, Seattle's looking at a wild card, and the Vikings are currently trying to play for the 1 seed, although they might both end up in a wild card if we're looking at that. But over under for this game at FanDuel is 43.5. 2 pass happy teams, over under 43.5. Kind of like that over, yeah?
You would think, but Seattle has played so many games that have been higher than that on over under, and then it's gone way under. And the defense has played really well, other than the first quarter last week. They have been dominant. Right. I mean, the 4 games before that, they gave up 13.7 points per game, and they scored 2 touchdowns on defense. I mean, this has been a unit that's not only been stopping people, they've been scoring points themselves. The Seahawks have scored more than 20 points in 1 of their last 5 games with their offense, though. And with the weapons they have, the quarterback they have, again, I have to keep pointing to the play caller, because it's like at some point you got to say, you got to be able to help your offensive line. And I think he's done the exact opposite. Ryan Grubb has got to show that he is willing to make adaptations. And the talent is there that this offense can put points on the board. We just haven't seen it happen this year. It just hasn't come together. So is this the game that it does? I don't know that I'm optimistic necessarily about that, but they're going to have to score some points because Minnesota's going to score points. I would go slightly over on that, but I think that the defense for the Seahawks is going to be kind of ticked off after last week, the way that first quarter went. Wouldn't be shocked if the weather comes into play too.
3-point spread right now. Vikings favored by 3 on the road. That was more when it looked like Geno was maybe not going to play, but with Geno Smith practicing in full, probably he's coming in, and that line comes down a little bit to -3. If Vikings fans know, you don't want to take my gambling advice. Okay, so I'm going to sit this one out, but I'll say it comes down to explosive plays and physicality, which is pretty boilerplate. But I would say that whoever wins up front is going to have that nice ability, keep their QB clean, start pushing the ball down the field, and eventually even good corners mess up.
If Seattle runs the football, and I know this is so generic, but if Seattle runs more than 35% of the time in this game, and they are able to at least have a little bit of success doing that, and they can create
Ben Baldwin just felt a disturbance in the force.
Yeah. They've got to play with that physicality you mentioned on both sides of the ball, creating pressure with their D line, and they've got to have some semblance of a run game. If they can do those two things, I think that they can cover this. But they have been so bad at home most of this year. That has been the weird thing about this team. They have been phenomenal on the road. They have looked like a team that want to play in the playoffs. They come back to Lumen, and I don't know if they need to start taking them on a bus from their practice facility to make it feel like
get them up in a plane and circle a couple times. And
yeah, they are playing so flat to begin games at home. And then that leads to the Packers fans last week screaming, "Go Pack, go," because the Seahawks fans are like, we're getting our butts kicked. Like, this isn't fun. They have taken the crowd out of it. And that's a huge advantage for this team. So they've got to be able to start faster. I don't know what the solution is to that. There's a lot of things that have to happen because I think Minnesota is the better team. If Seattle plays at their best, I certainly can see them winning this one. But there had to be some significant things go their way for me to not say the Vikings are going to cover that just because of what I've seen. I guess we'll find out on Sunday, though, because the Seahawks have been as unpredictable as any team in the league. We don't know what we're going to see. Maybe we see the team that won 4 games in a row and they make this really interesting. Or we see the team from last weekend and Minnesota is just laughing their way to a blowout win. I guess we'll find out when we get there on Sunday.
Luke has it covered with Vikings over at Locked On Vikings, and Corbin has it covered with Seahawks over at Locked On Seahawks, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. 49ers, it's just been a brutal season over there. Ton of injuries, obviously drama last week with Devondre Campbell refusing to play in a game. It's been rough for San Francisco coming off of their Super Bowl appearance, and the Miami Dolphins, another team that's had a rough go of it this season with underperforming expectations. So Brian Peacock of Locked On 49ers plus Kyle Krabs of Locked On Dolphins talk about which disappointing team will get the win on Sunday.
I would be an awful host to not give you the floor for what you feel, Brian, are your 3 keys to victory for the San Francisco 49ers coming across the country for a 4:25 kick at Hard Rock Stadium.
Yeah, love the later kick. West Coast kick time on the East Coast is
that
nice.
Must be nice.
Yeah, that is
must be nice.
When I was younger, I used to be so jealous of the East Coast. I was like, dude, watching games at midnight, that's awesome. Then you get older, you become a dad, and you're like, oh man, I love this 10 a.m. football over here on the West Coast. And all the late games are over by 8:30 p.m. Still do a podcast. It's not even that late post game if your team's playing in prime time. But 1:30 is the right time to play a football game. Let's just be
local time or
local time. It's the right time. That's when football should be played. And so it's good for us. Not as good for you, a little bit later start time over there. But you mentioned the lines there with the FanDuel read. The 49ers are always favored, even with they're not playing good and they're banged up. And, if you kind of have a game that seems like it's pretty equal matchup and equal records and, a game that might be somewhat of a pick 'em you would expect, the Niners are always favored in those games. So if FanDuel's jumping off the bandwagon for the 49ers, the Niners are in trouble right now, that they're not favored. And that means money is coming in on the Dolphins side. But for the 49ers, they have to get back to what they've been and they've got to be able to make big plays, and they've got to win some matchups at the line of scrimmage. And I've been borderline appalled at how many games the 49ers haven't won up front this year, because that's what they were built on, especially on the defensive line. It was day one, like line one of the manifesto of John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, is that we're going to build this thing around the defensive line. They even famously didn't scout Patrick Mahomes or the quarterbacks in the 2017 draft, because we're going to build this around the defensive line, and they drafted Solomon Thomas with their first pick. It was a big statement. And while that was a mistake, the statement and the plan I was on board with. And so watching how they haven't won up front in a lot of games, and especially late in games, they can't close it out even when they have a lead. It's been pretty distressing. So the 49ers have to be able to beat the Miami Dolphins offensive line, put some pressure on Tua, win some of those battles up front, with or without Dre Greenlaw. They have to be good with run fits. Obviously, Devondre Campbell's not going to be there either, because he walked out the door and got suspended. It's just been one of those seasons for the 49ers, by the way. Injuries and the guys getting pneumonia and just everything you could possibly imagine. Holdouts. Everything seems to be working against the San Francisco 49ers. But now that they know who's around, and maybe a galvanizing moment with a team that knows they're not in it anymore, can you prove that you belong on the team next year, and can you be part of this thing? And you got to win some of those battles up front. So that's where it starts for me for the 49ers. Get some movement in the running game, make some plays, some catch and run opportunities, and the defensive line beating the Dolphins offensive line is the number one matchup I think the 49ers have to win.
And I think for me in Miami, you need to find a way to get Tyreek Hill involved offensively. And what I hope that means is not tempting the middle of the field, where Fred Warner, regardless of who the other linebacker is, Fred Warner is the kind of guy that's got a gravitational pull unlike any other linebacker in the NFL. So they have been tight end and running back reliant, and those guys often get their targets in the middle of the field. The Dolphins had done a really nice job, and I think Houston had between Kamari Lassiter and Derek Stingley, they had a couple of guys that were playing hard flats and they're really explosive and twitchy, and they kind of voluntarily gave up other portions of the field and did not surrender that those outside the numbers, inside of 10-yard throws that the Dolphins had done a really good job of taking those profits when other teams were giving them to them. I think that's the challenge for Miami is middle of the field. We know you're going to try to take your shots in there, but you have to stay on schedule and get your best player the ball in a way that if that's going to play into what San Francisco is probably expecting and banking and constructing much of their plan to do the way that the Texans did, how else can you get Tyreek Hill the ball? I think that's the big question for them that they're going to need to answer if they're going to have a shot in this game, especially because of the pass rush ability that they have. I have no idea who's going to be playing tackles. Like Mike McDaniel left it open for it to be both Kendall Lamb and Teron Armstead, who both missed last week. And if this is it for Teron Armstead, I'm sure he's not going to want to start a game against the Jets, leave after 3 plays in the first possession, and then surrender his job to a rookie in Patrick Paul and ride off into the sunset, and that be the way that he goes out. So I've got no idea who's playing, but if it's not those guys in particular who can hold up in pass protection, then finding where are the free access throws on time. That's going to be the thing I think that is going to be most important for Miami.
What happened with Jalen Waddle this year? And I'm asking this mostly as a fantasy owner of his, and he became a guy. So I fully expect now that I was out of the playoffs that he's going to play and end up having some huge game against the 49ers, right? So what's going on with his injury situation, and what happened with him this year being a guy that had a couple of good games, but it seemed like he was just an afterthought in the offense.
Yeah. So his after catch production was down a little bit, and it was also down from the previous year in which he led the league with 18.1 yards per catch in 2022. It felt like, aside of the 4 games in which they just had a non-functional passing offense, and they couldn't do anything. And Brian, when I say anything, they could not hand the ball off from me to you 2 yards away from each other. Like, that's how bad it was. If you remove that block of the season, though, he was on pace for the same amount of targets as what he had the previous season. and he was close to the same yards per target amount. But they took the Tyreek Hill push for 2K yardage thing, and they split that yardage between Tyreek and Devon Achane and Jonnu Smith. And as a result, teams were still really committed to, we're going to play press on the two guys outside that are the speedsters. And it led to more big spots and more big space for the other players. So it was good that they anticipated that and invested in those positions. But teams have been slow to adjust with how they've played against it. And they've been continuing to give that free access. And that's been the biggest area of growth for Tua Tagovailoa this year is, and I had this critique going all the way back to when he came out of Alabama. Dude, take easy completions when they give them to you. And, so much of the offense last year was predicated on those 15-yard inbreakers that they ran, and they ran it into the teeth of the defense at times, and it got guys lit up. And you saw that against Grant Dubose, where they inverted into a Tampa 2, and they had the high post safety who just stood there, and he drove on it, and Grant Dubose had a really scary injury with that. So it's been a little bit more distribution-based. It sounds like he's day-to-day. He did not practice on Wednesday, but Mike McDaniel left the door open, just kind of got leg whipped and rolled up on, trying to peel back down and block on a safety that was coming down in the run game. So, but I mean, he had 2 of the 3 previous games before Houston. He went for 8, 144 and a touchdown and 9 for 99. So it was starting to, like, everything was coming together and looked like he was going to have his big blow up spots. And then of course gets hurt against Houston.
Mike McDaniel's not on the hot seat, is he? Because I was interested to see that there's maybe a GM change happening, but head coach is safe over there?
I would assume so. I would assume Mike has enough good graces. Now, if they're catastrophic the last 3 games, I think you maybe get into opening the door for that conversation, but they're very collaboration-based, and the general manager that's been there, Chris Greer, he is so collaborative that he molds his own identities to whatever coach he has to an umpteenth degree, that if Mike says we don't need to worry about guards and, Skylar Thompson's been in the system for 2 years, we don't need to worry about a backup quarterback. And those things come up and bite you in the rear. Like, you can only take so many of those L's before you're the guy that rubber stamps everything. And it's like, okay, maybe we need somebody who's going to push back on you a little bit more and actually be a little bit more collaborative and just saying, instead of saying, yeah, whatever you want, let's do that. So I would assume Mike is safe. I would expect if things, maybe they run the table, we can get some momentum and they feel really good about where they're at next year. But I would expect this year for Mike McDaniel specifically, if there is a general manager change, there will be pressure on him next season at a minimum.
Be sure to check out Brian over at Locked On 49ers and Kyle over at Locked On Dolphins, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Rounding out the 4 p.m. slate, the Jacksonville Jaguars and Las Vegas Raiders. Again, 2 teams that really haven't done much of anything this season. Disappointment all across the board for both of those teams. Tony Wiggins of Locked On Jaguars, your boy Q of Locked On Raiders. Talk about which team will pick up a win, although I'm not sure how much either team wants to win this game with draft position factoring in.
All right, man, we're rolling along here on Locked On Jaguars and Locked On Raiders, of course, today's show. And all of our shows across our Thursday podcasting network here on the Locked On Podcast Network is presented by PrizePicks. Download the app and use the code Locked On NFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. All right, game predictions. I ain't going to even try to predict the score. Let's do this. Let's do a baseball score. 2-1. How about that, right? Yeah, man. We got to find some juice in Vegas. If anything, Vegas ain't missing juice. So when you said they lack juice, I'm like, in Vegas, maybe the juice is what they had, and that's why they played like they couldn't play.
I don't know, but it was 15-9 Monday Night Football, Falcons and Raiders. Like, that is the most uninspiring game, and the Falcons got something to play for. They're trying to, get into the playoffs, and even they couldn't generate any juice. So shame on them, shame on the Raiders. I don't know, man. This is going to be an interesting game. Like I said earlier, I feel like Aiden O'Connell is trending in the right direction to get back out there. So if there's something to look for, and that's what I've been kind of doing the last few weeks, not really even talking about who's going to win or lose, because I just don't know, to be honest with you, and I don't want to represent the actual expectations of the game. But I'll just say straight up, to see if Aiden O'Connell could get adapted to what Scott Turner is doing as the offensive coordinator. Can Scott Turner be the offensive coordinator long term, or is the conversation about him possibly joining Bill Belichick in North Carolina, is that real? Is that something that he's already thinking of? I'll say this: the offense didn't look very good after that report came out, so I don't know if you could tie 2 and 2 together, or if it's the fact that he was with Desmond Ridder as the quarterback. So there's that. I just want to really see who can step up that's a young player that could show that they can be a part of this team moving forward. And then, as we talked about Brock Bowers so much in segment number 1 and what he's able to bring to the table, I'm hoping he could break some records, man. There's a few more records that are still there to be had. Puka Nacua, as a rookie, had 105 receptions, and Brock Bowers is at 90. So that's not a whole lot away. I mean, he can catch them in 3 games, and I think that Brock Bowers should be a guy you target 10 times anyway, but the last couple games, it hasn't been that for the Silver and Black. So I'd like to see Brock Bowers get a heavy dose of targets and maybe come away with a heavy dose of catches and get that much closer to Puka Nacua. Again, it's been a season where it's been disappointing, but he has been everything but disappointing. He has been fantastic. I'd love to see him go ahead and continue to get the the awards and the accolades as a rookie.
So check this out. Non-quarterbacks, because everybody talks about Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix, rightfully so.
Yeah.
Brock Bowers, I did Locked On the NFL yesterday, and I said that Brian Thomas Jr. was going to win the Rookie of the Year, and David Harrison for the Commander said, no, he isn't. But he was talking about Jaden or Bo.
Yeah.
I did not know Brock Bowers almost had 100 catches. But let me get a load of this. If the draft was tomorrow, Brian Thomas Jr. would go top 5. Let me show you his stats. 64 receptions, 956 yards with 8 touchdowns, and he's played like 4 games without Trevor Lawrence. That's pretty damn good for that kid that was picked 23rd overall here in Jacksonville. So one of the things we can look at, and then they force-fed him the ball the other day. He had 10 catches. So we can at least get this view of these 2 fabulous rookies that I believe, barring injury, have a very, very big future. 2 SEC guys have a very big future in the National Football League. I'm going to go out on a limb. The Jaguars have enough to win because Trayvon Walker is very, very good. Trayvon Walker might make the Pro Bowl this year. Trayvon Walker in the last 2 years has like 19 sacks, and we still got 3 games to go. So I think he's their best defensive player. Brian Thomas Jr. is their best offensive player. And Mac Jones, while he's probably a career backup, and that has been substantiated by the way he plays sometimes, he's still very, very capable. Their offensive line is gelling, even though they're never going to be good enough, I believe, to win a championship unless they make changes. The Jaguars have some pieces, and they've been in a lot of close games, and they just find different ways to lose a game, which can be discouraging. But it sounds like it's way better than what the Raiders got. It's like the Raiders are just totally off the rails.
I mean, they're just it's not a good thing right now. And they fight hard, right? They play hard. Even the results, if you look at some of the scores, you say, oh, man, they got blown out. Not really. It just the wheels fell off at the very end. Even the game on Monday against the Falcons, I mean, look, they're 2 Hail Marys away from winning that game. I mean, they threw it into the end zone. The first one sailed out. The second one got intercepted, but they literally could have won that game. So it's been some tough losses for the Raiders. I feel like that they've got a lot of weight on their shoulders from this season, and it's just starting to crack through. It's starting to be too much, right, from all the changes that they've had and all the injuries that they've dealt with and changes at the quarterback position, who's in now, who's not in. It's been a lot. Jacoby Myers in the locker room told me that it's been a lot, right? He's just, and that's fair. So they're trying to get to the finish line. They're going to give them everything that they've got. Mac Jones almost, pulled the Jaguars over the Jets on Sunday. Almost had that victory. I thought that they were going to win that one. I'm sure Raider Nation was actually rooting for the Jaguars to win that one for multiple reasons. One, they could just win another game, and 2, so the Jets and Devontae Adams lose another one. But they pulled that one out at the end. So there's no love lost there between the Raiders and Devontae. So that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, man, I mean, the Jaguars, they've got talent, as you know. So it should be at the very least an interesting game come Sunday.
They lost 12-7 to Minnesota about 3 weeks ago. That's just who they are, man. They'll play you and they'll get into the fourth quarter, and all of a sudden, Murphy's Law, whatever can go wrong will go wrong. So here's the $1 million question. Not who's going to win. Whose fan base wants them to win? Because the Jaguars, they want to beat everybody. They don't care about draft selections. They feel like Balky's going to mess it up anyway. And then they're coming off of a year where they picked maybe the third or fourth best player in the draft. In a lot of people's opinion, they got him at 23. So it's almost like, don't let him pick early. Let him fall down and pick late so something will fall to him. You guys, your fans probably don't want to win this game at all, though, because that knocks them even further back from the quarterback scenario that they like.
Yeah, for the most part, most of Raider Nation is not rooting for a win. They're not. And I say this all the time. I'm never going to pull for a loss. It's just not in me. I'm just not going to root for a loss. But when the Raiders lose these days, it's a lot more acceptable, right? It's a lot more acceptable because you know what the end result could potentially be. Like you have in Jacksonville, you have your franchise quarterback. The Raiders haven't had a franchise quarterback in quite a bit. They had Derek Carr for 9 years, and he stabilized with the position. But when you've got Mahomes, Herbert, and now Bo Nix in your division, you want that difference maker. So I think that they need to go get that guy, but I'm not going to actively campaign for them to lose games because it's just not in me, and it's not really in Raider Nation. But I think a lot more the fan base is saying, yeah, I'm okay. If they lose, I can deal with that. It's not a problem.
All right, so you asked me the question, who would it be? Lately, Travis Hunter's kind of hit. He don't want to come down here. So the one thing about Jaguar fans, if you act like you don't want to be here, they don't want you. So they're going probably, you see a lot of people talk about the corner from Michigan, the tall kid.
Okay,
the other kid at Michigan, Mason Graham, the defensive tackle. Or I'm hearing a little bit of Tretoria McMillan talk to pair him with Brian Thomas Jr., the next Mike Evans, some people think. So they can't go wrong either way if they end up with a really good player.
Be sure to go support Tony over at Locked On Jaguars and Q over at Locked On Raiders, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Rounding out the show coming up, 2 primetime battles to get into. We'll talk about key predictions, key storylines, and a lot more on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. First, the show is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free online courses, including Constitution 101, Introduction to Free Market Economics, and so much more. If you want a course on the Great American Story, Hillsdale has that as well. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced, so that you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. Back here on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Week 16 edition of the show. We got 2 primetime games to get to here, starting off with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Dallas Cowboys. Tampa obviously leading the NFC South. Dallas looking to play spoiler. We'll talk with James Jericho of Locked On Bucks, Marcus Mosher of Locked On Cowboys about which team will pull off the win.
It's a crossover edition of the Locked On Bucks and Locked On Cowboys podcast. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. It is James Jericho from Locked On Bucks. James, let's talk about the Bucks first. What did they need to do on Sunday night to get a victory?
I would say, the keys in this one, keep running the football, bring the pressure like you did against Justin Herbert, and don't let the moment get too big. So let's start with running the football. Dallas allows 4.8 yards per carry this season, 4.5 yards per carry over the last 3 games. But at home, they're allowing over 5 yards per carry. The Buccaneers
is that bad?
Yeah, a little bit. It's not good. We'll say that. But the Bucs are second in the NFL at 5.2 yards per carry on the season, 5.9 in the last 3 games. And they've been better at running the ball on the road, averaging 5.7 a carry compared to 4.6 at home. So the key to all of this is give the ball to Bucky Irving and Rachaad White. That's what you need to do. And we've seen Baker make some mistakes. We've seen him throw some bad interceptions by making some bad decisions. We've seen him throw some interceptions that were just great defensive plays. You tip your cap, you keep it moving. But the Bucs tend to get a little heavier into the run game in the second half. They need to start heavier in the run game and immediately take the pressure off of Baker. Speaking of pressure, bring it against Cooper Rush. He's been sacked 11 times this season, 4 in the last 2 games, and he's being pressured on 16.5% of his dropbacks. That's going to lead to mistakes if the Bucs can generate the amount of pressure that they did on Justin Herbert. They snapped his interception streak when Jamel Dean plucked one out of there, but they were constantly all over him, whether it was Vita Vea or Kalijah Kancey. Levante David was making Justin Herbert's life miserable. That's the level of pressure that you have to bring, because while Rush has done a solid job of protecting the football when it's in the air, he's fumbled 9 times in the last 7 games. He's only had 1 game in the last 7 weeks where he didn't fumble at all. So if you get to him, there's a good chance you're going to get the football. And then finally, not letting the moment get too big. The Bucs are 0-5 in primetime games in the Baker Mayfield era. They lost to Philly and Buffalo last season. That Buffalo one I'm still bitter about because there was a Hail Mary at the end where Chris Godwin was just, it should have been aggravated assault charges, but no pass interference was called anyway. And then this year they blew one to Atlanta. Then they lost to Baltimore in the same game where they lost Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And then they lose to Kansas City in overtime. So 0-5. Don't let primetime pressure get you. You have an opportunity to continue to control your own destiny, knock the Falcons' playoff hopes almost off of a cliff. You have to find a way to win in primetime.
And for the Cowboys, it's just don't beat yourself, right? You are clearly the underdogs in this game. Last time I checked with our friends at FanDuel, the Cowboys were 4-point home underdogs. You just don't have that talented of a roster compared to what the Bucs have right now. It happens. Like, injuries happen across the NFL. So don't beat yourself, right? Last week against Carolina, the Cowboys were really good in the red zone, but as they were trying to ice that game away, they run a read option. I don't know why you run a read option with Cooper Rush, but Cooper Rush pulls the ball. It gets stuck on Rico Dowdle's hip, and it's a fumble. Carolina recovers. They are not a talented enough team to make multiple mistakes like that and overcome it and win this game. So things are going to happen. Tampa Bay is going to make great plays in this one. You can't afford to give the ball away unnecessarily, right? And then on defense, your defense is going to make some plays. You've got to find a way to create strip sacks. Baker has been awesome this year, but he's had more turnover-worthy plays maybe than what you would like to see. So if you get the opportunity to make one of those turnover-worthy plays, make it. And that's going to have to be your offense. We know this Cowboys offense in most games struggles to go over 20 points. So if you can get turnovers on defense, if you can get shorter fields with your special teams, you're going to have to do it. And the third and final key is just keep it close, right? Keep this game close going into the fourth quarter because you never know what's going to happen. Again, Dallas has not a lot to play for, so they can play loose. But if Tampa Bay gets late into this game and it's in the fourth quarter and they're down by 4 and they've got to make a stop on the Cowboys, maybe that's when things start to get a little tight for them. So keep this game close as we get towards the end of regulation, and you'll just see what happens. I do think this is going to be a fun game. I think there's going to be a lot of points scored on both sides. I do think Tampa's going to win. But again, it's a Sunday night football game in Dallas. You never know, James. Never know.
Yeah, exactly. And the Bucs, they did well against the Cowboys up until Brady's final playoff game during the Brady era, but they've historically had, a lot of trouble with the Cowboys over the last 10, 15 years. Of course, different teams, it shakes out different ways. I remember when they flexed the Bucs and Cowboys into Sunday night football a few years back because the game had playoff implications for both. That was the birth of the Ezekiel Elliott into the Salvation Army bucket happen. But that was a really good game. So it could be an instant classic that no one's really expecting because these two teams always tend to play each other really, really tough under the spotlight. If you're a Bucs fan, you're just hoping that this primetime streak finally comes to an end because it seems like all the worst things that could possibly happen to the Buccaneers happen when it's prime time.
And I think Baker Mayfield has only played Dallas once in his career. I remember them playing in 2020. I believe Cleveland scored 49 points in that game as Baker went absolutely wild. He loves playing in Dallas. He loves playing at AT&T Stadium. So I expect him to be lights out in prime time.
Marcus is great. Check him out over at Locked On Cowboys. James is great. Check him out over at Locked On Bucs, part of Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Rounding out this week, it's the New Orleans Saints and the Green Bay Packers. What a rough year for New Orleans. Now Alvin Kamara injured. It's been all types of just bad for the Saints this season. The Packers, meanwhile, are looking to keep momentum going and get a playoff berth and get as high of a seat as they can. So Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints and Peter Bukowski of Locked On Packers take you through who wins this game.
All right, we're back here, Locked On Packers, Locked On Saints. A crossover Thursday for Monday Night Football. Ross Jackson, Peter Bukowski with you. You know this. It's right there in the description in the podcast, right in your app or on YouTube, wherever you are. Ross, I mentioned turnovers before we went to break. This is a Packers defense that has specialized in turnovers, been among league leaders all season long. It is the one thing that in a game like this, when you're 2 touchdown favorites, that can turn things. If the Packers turn the ball over 2 or 3 times, that seems to be the clearest path if you're a Saints fan to go, if we can get Jordan Love to throw us a couple of these, that's how we try and stay in this game.
Yeah, the big issue for New Orleans is that while turnovers were the name of the game for them early on in the season, over the course of the past 4 or 5 games or so, they've not been generating the turnovers nearly at the same rate. There's a Demario Davis interception recently. He actually had one that he dropped as well. He came up in the post-game presser and looked right at us and said, after I'm done with here, I'm going to go home, jump on Amazon, and I'm going to get an express shipment of some hands because I need some hands. He said he dropped 2 interceptions that day. Came back a couple weeks later.
I do need to know where he's getting whatever he's getting from the fountain of youth, because he's still, like he's approaching 40 and still playing like an elite player. It's really remarkable what he's been able to do.
Yeah, insane. He did wherever he got the fountain of youth. It ain't from Amazon, because it ain't readily available like that. That's for sure. There's no doubt about that. If PrizePicks had a more or less for Demario Davis at 40 years of NFL play, not 40 years old, but 40 years of NFL play, I might consider taking the more on that situation.
Yeah,
but
he's 35 and playing like he's 28. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's incredible. And he just had one of his better games, 14 tackles, a sack, 2 tackles for a loss, and then several pressures as well. So just came off one of his better games of the season. So he's going to be a guy that's going to be big in terms of trying to generate those turnovers, either by pass rushing and trying to force by that blitz, trying to force those mistakes that we were talking about from Jordan Love, if they can get them, or just prowling the middle of the field and trying to take away some options. So he's going to be a key player to watch in that very situation when it comes to the turnovers. Meanwhile, over the Saints offensive side, keeping away from the turnovers is going to be a little tricky, right? I mean, you've got a good defense and a good team on the other side that's going to apply pressure with the success of its offense, and a rookie quarterback more than likely that's got to be able to respond to that. That's a tricky situation to be in.
I have a maybe indelicate question.
Sure.
Do the Saints fans want to win this game?
I think so. I think for the most part, you'll find that Saints fans do want to see them win, because a lot of Saints fans are excited about Spencer Rattler, and they're more excited about Spencer Rattler than they are kind of excited about any quarterback you're going to get in this year's draft if you're not picking in the top 3. Like, there's really, this quarterback class is like dismal outside of maybe some of the top guys, and even some of the top guys the jury's very much out on. So we'll see which way it goes there. But I think that you'll probably hear like, oh, well, they should be vying for draft position, but wait and see what else happens around. The Saints went for the win last week, and if they would have won last week, it wouldn't have impacted their draft position at all. That could potentially happen again here come Monday with all the games complete on Sunday.
I loved the decision. Like I was saying, go for 2. You guys should be going for 2, especially in a season like this. And I think it speaks to the impact that Darren Rizzi has had. Because, like, do you think Dennis Allen makes that call?
Exactly. And no, I don't. And here's the other thing. You go back to the 4th downs that they attempted against the Los Angeles Rams at home. The fact that when the Rams, when they were driving and they were 1 potential touchdown away from tying that game, but they were going to go for 2 had they got that touchdown to go for the win. You look at the very first 4th down of Darren Rizzi's tenure up against the Atlanta Falcons. They marched out there, went for it, didn't get it. It's just part of what it is that Darren Rizzi does. He promised a couple of things. He promised passion, he promised fight, and he promised that the team would not be boring. And so far, he's made good on that promise. That's for sure.
Yeah, it is a little bit for Packers fans who are maybe extremely online or just extremely obsessed with their team, which I assume is most of my audience. They remember that Darren Rizzi was a potential candidate for the Packers special teams job once upon a time. And according to the reporting and some of the things that I've heard, that was scuttled because they could not come to an agreement with the administration on the money. One of the few times I've ever heard of the Packers administration in a situation like, because they don't have an owner, remember?
Right.
Coming in and saying, we don't really do that. And I just wonder if like 2 years later, he had tried to do that, Matt LaFleur, after winning 13 games back-to-back seasons, that they just sort of say, yeah, here's a blank check. Like, hire whoever you want. They did that. They made Mike Pettin. Mike Pettin was one of the highest paid defensive coordinators. They made Rich Bisaccia the highest paid special teams coordinator in the NFL. So it's one of those sliding doors moments. Like there is definitely a timeline where Darren Rizzi is the special teams coordinator for the Packers. They win the Super Bowl in 2021 because they don't have such a dog water special teams group.
unit.
and Darren Rizzi is now, not the interim coach for the New Orleans Saints. Is he someone that you think Saints fans are like, hey, like give this guy a legitimate shot to keep this job?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are. It's kind of the one exception that I've seen for a while around the idea of like, hey, stick with the in-house guy, and people actually being kind of okay with it. Now, obviously, there's a lot of people that say, no, blow it up, go ahead, completely redo everything, all that. But the fact of the matter is that there's only so much the Saints can blow up this offseason because of their very precarious salary cap situation, which we have to revisit every season. They're like $62 million over the salary cap. Small potatoes,
tweet, like that
yeah,
kind of thing.
Yeah, small potatoes, $62 million over the salary cap. That's nothing. But that's going to be a part of the truth for them going into 2025. They don't really have the ability to blow a lot of stuff up. So why not give the guy that's in-house, that has the rhythm with the guys, give your offensive coordinator a second year for a change, all these other things, and then be able to kind of walk into a second year of a similar setup here as you're ending in 2024. And then if it doesn't work in 2 or 3 years, after you've hit the reset button and after you have a better product to offer from a financial standpoint, then you can go and look for another head coach at that time. And I'll tell you what, too, when it comes to Darren Rizzi, I think you'll see the value of Darren Rizzi here as Packers fans going into this game, because a big reason why the Saints have won their games, 2 blocked field goals, being able to control the field position battle, all those other things. Those are going to be things that are probably going to be present in this game, to where you're going to see Darren Rizzi and what he does on the special team side be a factor in the game, just as valuable as the offensive or defensive factor.
Ross, that's not helpful to me.
I'm very sorry
with the fan base, because this is going to freak them out, because we are laying out the case for how Packer fans have seen the Packers blow stupid games like this in the past, where you get a punt blocked, or you get a field goal blocked return for a touchdown, or
the Saints haven't had a punt block in a little while. That's a good point, Peter. I'm glad you brought that up.
I don't like this at all. So look, I think the Packers should win this game handily. I think they will. I think this is going to be one of those like 30-14 kind of games, 30-17 kind of games.
I think they cover.
Well, like 30-17, there's not going to cover, and it's still going to be a basket game. So it's sort of like, I'm not going to bet on the Packers to cover 14.5. I'll tell you that. But just because I think that's ludicrous in the NFL for anyone to be 14.5 point favorites, though the Ravens, of course, they more than covered against the Giants last week. So we'll see. And the Packers had their problems with Tommy DeVito last year. We know how that looks. So I think this is a better Packers team. I said on social media the other day, Ross, that this is the most complete Packers team since 2010. If that's true, and by DVOA, that is just like, that's what the numbers say.
Right.
So if that's true, the Packers should win. They should win comfortably. And we'll get to podcast live after the game.
Yeah, it's gonna be a ton of fun. I think the Packers walk away with a win here too. I think the Saints win also, or Saints can win also, because I think that the Saints are in the world of moral victories now, because you're not going to the playoffs, right? You need to win out. You need the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to lose out. It's not going to happen at this point. And so what you want to see is, do the young guys like Spencer Rattler, running back Kendre Miller, left tackle Taliesin Fuanga, who's been awesome so far this season, and maybe some of the younger defensive guys, do you start to see some of the building blocks for your future that upon which you get to lay a foundation going into 2025, step up and shine a little bit? And I think if you see that, then you're in a winning situation in terms of what your future can look like. But I don't think that this is a game where the Saints are going to be walking away with a win in the win-loss column in particular.
Yeah, and the Packers, I think they want to avoid a Pyrrhic victory, right? Where they guys get hurt, or someone who tries to play like. There's a lot of Packer fans going, do not play Jair Alexander in this game. It's okay. Like, they need him in the playoffs. And so I think you will see them be a little conservative with some of these guys. They would love nothing more than to play Malik Willis in the fourth quarter. So not that like that's going to happen necessarily, but I think that's certainly probably the goal. Like, is it really smart analysis to suggest that the team wouldn't love to blow out the other team? But but I think that's sort of what they're looking at, is like, let's just go win. That's all that matters. And then we'll figure out the rest.
Ross is great. Check him out over at Locked On Saints. Peter is great. Check him out over at Locked On Packers, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. That's all I have for you here today on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. We have a great slate of action for you next week during Week 17 show, so be sure to stay tuned for that. And I'll see you right back here next time on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show.